what I mentioned in terms of Trey Lance, and I know that there's some stuff with Trey with where you know 49ers used a first round draft pick on Trey Lance, right? He's not playing though, and is that a bad thing for the 49ers to have used three draft picks, three first round draft picks, plus a third round draft pick? Uh, to acquire a guy in the first round that's not going to be able to play this year or isn't playing this year, they're not utilizing him all that much. And there's a couple of different things about that I wanted to discuss, and I'll go ahead and discuss it by myself here. Number one, it's different when you draft a quarterback in round one than if you draft a player at any other position, because there can only be one on the field at any given point in time, unless you're going to do a wildcat situation, and that usually doesn't work all that well for teams in the NFL. So you're either going to be riding and dying with that rookie, or you're going to go ahead and you're going to sit him on the bench. So that's one. The other thing is the 49ers are in a salary cap situation, where after this year, things are going to get really tight for them. Even though the salary cap's going to go up a little bit next year, and obviously the years after that too, with a new TV deal, they have a lot of players, particularly Nick Bosa, that are going to be extremely expensive. I think Bosa is a guy that they're going to want to re-sign. I think that's what their plan is at this point. And so in order to get ahead of that salary cap thing, they needed to get a quarterback in place. If you're going to take a quarterback, and they felt like Trey Lance is the best quarterback in this draft, that's going to be around the best quarterback, say in year 2, year 3, year 4, or maybe the best quarterback at all over the course of their career from this draft, then you go ahead and you take that guy when you did. He's not that expensive. I think that there's a really good chance that Trey Lance is the starting quarterback for the 49ers from 2022 on. I think that he's going to, there's a really good chance that he's the starting quarterback next year, that they move on from Jimmy Garoppolo at the end of this season. Heck, they might even move on from Jimmy Garoppolo at some point this year if they start losing and the season becomes lost. I think as long as the 49ers are in position, winning games, and they're not losing it because of the quarterback, Lance is only going to be doing what we've seen of him so far. So the whole deal with Lance, they spent the money, they spent the draft capital to get a guy because he's going to be a good player down the road for them at the quarterback position, where only one could be on the field, and his salary cap number is going to be something that's really going to help the 49ers out moving down the road when they start to having to re-sign the Bosas and Kittle's contract starts to get bigger. Armstead's contract starts to grow. All these contracts are going to be ballooning here in a couple of years, within the next 2 to 3 years, because George Kittle is still on a lower price deal, and so on and so forth. So those deals are going to kind of be ballooning up, and I think the 49ers wanted to get ahead of that. I don't know if they felt better about Trey Lance and the guys that are in this draft, and that's why they wanted to do it. I've heard, that thrown out there at times, but I don't know, because I'm not in their building to know their thoughts on it. I don't know enough about these rookies or these the guys that are going to be coming out of this draft to say one way or another. But with this whole situation, I think you just got to kind of have a little bit of patience here. Garoppolo is going to have his ups and downs. Like I said to Aruna, Jimmy Garoppolo is a flawed quarterback that just wins, and obviously the defense helps him out. But every quarterback in the NFL gets helped out by their defense to win games at times. So, in terms of the worry about, do the 49ers have the talent to be able to win a shootout? Like I mentioned to Aruna in this show tonight, yeah, they do. They have the same talent on the offensive side of the ball as they had in 2019. I think you can take out Emmanuel Mosley, and Brandon Ayuk supplants him in that role, in that kind of a downfield receiver role. Deebo Samuel is off to a really good start here this season. George Kittle is going to be a guy that's going to make plays for this team. They're a little banged up in the running back room, but that's going to sort itself out as the season goes along. And you got to remember, in 2019, they got into shootouts in the second half of the season. They got into a shootout against New Orleans, and they won. They got into a shootout against the Rams. They were down by, they're down in that game. And so they had to come back, and they had to score 34 points, and they did. there were a lot of plays throughout that season where they had, they got behind, they blew that game against Pittsburgh in the beginning of the season. I think it was week 2, week 3, whatever it was. They were awful in that game, but they were able to come back and win. And obviously part of that was Mason Rudolph instead of a good quarterback on the other side of the field. But that stuff all plays into the way that a season unfolds. So that's just kind of my thoughts on that. Just have a little bit of patience, have a little bit of faith in Jimmy Garoppolo that he's going to be able to make things happen. And also have a little bit of faith in the fact that that if he doesn't, and it gets to the point where he needs to be pulled out or he gets injured again, they have Trey Lance. And that's the other part of why Lance is here. Just taking a couple of comments really quick. E. Kim, who was Korean 49er that was on earlier, he says that his issue with the Lance trade is that they gave up a ton of assets to get him as a backup. I felt that they could get a backup QB via free agency or later in the draft. Well, that's, again, they weren't able to get a backup quarterback in free agency. That's what they were trying to do. They tried to, that's why they were talking to Andy Dalton. That's why they were talking to Joe Flacco. That's why they were talking to Mitchell Trubisky. That they were talking to these guys, trying to bring them in as free agents, and they weren't able to. And I think that this is kind of a little bit of a spinoff. I think that the 49ers originally, when they were looking at this board, and maybe I'm wrong and dead wrong, I think that when they were looking to get a backup quarterback in, I don't think that they were going to draft a quarterback at 15, having Jimmy Garoppolo plus a veteran. I don't think that's what they were going to do, especially with the guys that they were talking to. I think that their plan at that point was to draft Mac Jones, and that they were going to have him be the starter because they felt that he was going to be ready, and that a guy like Andy Dalton or Joe Flacco or Mitchell Trubisky could be a good backup behind him if he should struggle and have to be pulled, or if he was to get injured. But they were going to go with Mac Jones. When free agency ended and they didn't get any of those guys, and if you recall the reports, there was a lot of frustration, especially over missing out on Andy Dalton. I think that's the point in which they went ahead and they pivoted and decided they were going to go ahead and get the quarterback that they did, and that they were going to get Trey Lance at that point. And they were going to stick with Garoppolo. They're kind of going to be stuck with him because they couldn't trade him. They couldn't find anybody through free agency that they wanted to get. And so that they decided at that point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to run with Garoppolo here in 2021 and take the guy who we feel has the bigger upside instead of the guy that's going to be able to play right now. And, we're going to take a little bit different approach and go slower with this thing. And then but in order to get Trey Lance, they had to trade up. They weren't going to get him at 12. I don't think that there was any way that he was going to get all the way to 12. I think there was somebody that was going to take him. Atlanta, for example, was a name who was mentioned over and over again for a quarterback at that spot so that they could develop behind Matt Ryan. So I don't think the 49ers would have been able to sit at their drafts position and get a guy. So they were going to have to use the capital. And yeah, they got him as a backup this year, but the long-term plan is he's going to be the guy. And they're better for it this year. And I think there's going to be a lot of turnover in this team in the next 2 years. And so that's going to be part of why Lance can maybe be a little bit of a buffer there, because he'll be having that year in the system, and he's going to be able to be stepping into it. Even though it might be his first start in 2022, he's going to have been around the team, and he's going to have a better foundation under him when he finally does take the field. So that's my 2 thoughts on that, my 2 cents on that whole thing. Dimitri makes a good point here too. They were going to grab Watson before the scandal. Mac Jones is nothing but Jimmy G all over again, a statue with limited ability. Yeah, that could be it too. Maybe they were going to go out and get Watson before the scandal. Maybe that's the draft capital they gave up to use to get up to Trey Lance. Maybe it was Watson. Okay, that's fine. And I agree with Mac Jones. I would say Mac Jones is very similar to Jimmy Garoppolo. I like the fact, what I liked most about him is that his ability to throw with anticipation and his accuracy on his throws. That's what he's showing in New England. The difference between Jimmy Garoppolo and Mac Jones is that Mac Jones gives you that type of performance at about a fifth of the cost, which I'm totally fine if I get that level of play repeatedly, and my quarterback's only costing me at a cost of only about $6 million instead of 26. If you had Mac Jones and we're able to build around him, I think that would be fine. Uh, we'll see. I mean, like I said, I'm fine with Trey Lance. Lance brings a running element to the game. He's definitely more mobile than Jones. Jones is not a statue. He's more mobile than Jimmy Garoppolo is. But uh, as far as Lance, we'll see what happens. He's got to develop and become a better. He's got to become a better uh, thrower of the football. And what I mean by that is he's got to. It's what I was trying to explain and why he's not starting right now. And in part is because he's late with his throws. He's not anticipating. He has to see it before he throws it. More often than not, of course, there's going to be times when that's not the case, but more often than not, he needs to see it before he throws it. And when you watch enough of Trey Lance's film from college, you see that there's times when he doesn't throw the ball because when there's a defender between him and the receiver. We saw that play out in the preseason. We saw him do that. There's a reason, if you watched my film breakdown today of the game, you see Jimmy Garoppolo throw that deep curl route to Deebo Samuel. That's the same play that that Trey Lance was called for Trey Lance on his first play as a 49er against Kansas City in the preseason, except for the only difference was that had play action as well to help suck the linebackers in. He had the same receiver open as Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo threw it in there and completed it. Lance didn't throw the ball, looked to the right, didn't throw the ball, and then started running. And it was going to be a nice completion if Ayuk holds on to the throw. But it never should have gotten to that point, and that's some of the issues that I think Kyle Shanahan, and I'm speaking for him, nothing that he said obviously, but I think that's part of the reason why Kyle Shanahan went ahead and did what he did and is starting Jimmy Garoppolo over Trey Lance, and why that's the situation that we're in. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the quarterback stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. It was definitely entertaining and fun. It's always fun to get excited and talk football and debate. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know that I'm completely off my rocker if you think that's the case too. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. I'd love it. The more you disagree with me, the better also, because the better I become. And sometimes I'm not completely shut down to your opinions. So hope you guys have a good night. Thank you everybody for joining. And like Josh over here says, smash the like button, shoot some comments out and everything else. Have a good night, everybody. And we will be back.